Good afternoon. We'll call to order the Lake Havasu Metropolitan Planning Organization Executive Board meeting on Tuesday, September 14th, 2021 at 2 p.m. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next, if we could do the roll call, please.
Cal Sheehy.
Here.
Buster Johnson.
Are you on microphone? Oh, okay, perfect.
David Lane.
Here.
Gary Knight.
Present.
Jenny Koch. Todd Steinberger.
I don't think you can hear you.
Todd Steinberger.
You're not coming across.
I'm here.
All right, perfect. We have a quorum. Item 4 is Title 6, notice to the public.
The Lake Havasu Metropolitan Planning Organization complies with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. LHMPO operates without regards to race, color, or national origin. LHMPO meetings are held in accessible locations, and materials are provided in accessible formats or in languages other than English upon request with a reasonable advance notice period.
Thank you. Item 5 is the call to the public. This is where citizens have the opportunity to address the executive board on issues within the jurisdiction of the MPO. Comments would be limited to 5 minutes or less. Would anyone like to address the board at call to the public? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the call to the public. Item 6 is approval of the meeting minutes from August 10th, 2021.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
motion to approve the meeting minutes.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion from Councilmember Lane and a second from Supervisor Johnson to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Item 7 is approval of the fiscal year 2021 Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP Amendment number 8. Mr. Hembry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for this action item, we've called it the TIP Amendment number 8, but actually it's a consolidated TIP amendment. There's actually 7 changes, but instead of doing 7 separate action items, we went ahead and consolidated it. For those on the phone, under the PDF on the bookmarks on the left-hand side, we bookmarked each action item for ease of reference and or navigation. So under 7, there's about a 3 or 4 page breakdown. But before I get to the changes, I want to go ahead and highlight the TIP. We reformatted the TIP itself. If you'll bear with me for a second. So on the top of the TIP, each page, we basically broke it down per funding source. So in the past, all these funding sources were shoved into basically one spreadsheet. So to help that, we changed it to where each page or several pages at the very top, you'll notice the funding sources right there at the top. So the first one is Surface Transportation Block Grant, STBG projects. The next page is the Highway Safety Improvement Program projects. Then we come to the Greater Arizona Legislative Set-Aside projects, which we'll get to here in a minute. And then the Transit 5310. We don't have the Transit 5307 because they're currently working on some of their reformatting and some of their amendments, so we didn't include it in today's updates. And then also the other change that we did in the past, they would show all 5 years of the project with design and construction, the local match, and the construction all on one line item. The reason why we broke it out per year is to show the local match as the fiscal year happens, because that's very important for the local agencies to show exactly how much they're on the hook for that cash match, instead of just saying X amount of dollars for the entire project. Well, design happens 1 year, construction can happen 3 to 4 years later. So it's good for the member agencies to know, well, what do we have to come up with and vote, relative councils and boards this fiscal year. So that's why we broke that out. So hopefully that helps navigate. Again, you're used to seeing kind of that peach colored tip. We reformatted the thing and everything's blue and yellow now. So with that, thank you. I'll go ahead and get to the actual changes. So the first change is Amendment 8.1. Last April, the executive board for the MPO approved in the work program roughly $19,000 for FY22 and 23. It was STBG funds to be utilized for future HSIP crash data analysis and applications. So it was approved in the work program. However, it was not placed on the tip. So it's anytime you use STBG, it has to be placed on the tip. So project's already approved for future use. Just want to make sure we get it on there. So that's 8.1. 8.2 was the London Bridge Road improvements. Now they show here we're canceling it out for STBG, but we're actually not canceling the project. Circa 2019, this project was placed on the MPO tip, but then a few months later, Adot announced their call for HSIP projects for grants, and the MPO pursued that. They were awarded the grant funds. Therefore, we don't need the STBG. There's no sense of having the same project twice. So this would remove that project in STBG because we have HSIP for the same exact improvements, the same exact scope. That's 8.2. For 8.3, this is the HSIP project. Again, some of this is administrative, but for transparency, I wanted to make sure that board members knew these projects are coming off and there's a good reason why. So for 8.3, it was the update to the Havasu Transportation Safety Plan. So most state and federal grant applications require you to put projects in the tip as a part of the application submittal process in a parking lot pending status. So this project was placed there, but it was never removed, and we did not, the MPO was not awarded those funds to update our safety plan. The good news is we knew that we weren't awarded. We've strategized the last few years. I know back when Vinny was here, that's why that $19,000 per year in STBG to do crash data analysis and to do application development, that was in response to not getting the funds to update our safety plan. So we were aware of it. We're already accommodating that so we can still pursue HSIP funding and safety grants. But again, this was just a parking lot project. We actually never were awarded the funds to update our safety plan, so got to kick that one off the list. Now the next one, 8.4, I believe I am on, was for the Swanson Okoma traffic signal. Now this one I know you guys are very familiar with. Originally the project was roughly $725,000. It went off to design at project management at Adot, and they came back and basically said, you're a little low on that budget. Something was wrong with the scope. I'm not sure what. They came back and said, you need to throw another $324,000 at these improvements at this intersection. The catch there is usually when you're awarded grant funds, if there's an overage, it's on the local agencies to come up with that overage. And our response was, well, we don't have the funds at the time. Adot Traffic Safety, to their credit, basically said, okay, well, we can throw the 324 in the pot, meaning the locals won't have to come up with another dime. However, we need to postpone this project in order to fund this project. So everything got kicked back an entire fiscal year. So design is actually going to happen in FY22 and construction in FY23. So before it was 21 and 22, now it's 22, 23. So project is still there. It's not canceled. It's still just north of $1 million for those improvements. But again, it's just a schedule change. Under 8.5, this is just a FYI, it's administrative. Every year, I believe you met the WACOG mobility manager, Felicia Mondragon. She is the one responsible for coordinating all the 5310 nonprofit transit service providers. So the smaller ones, not your city agency or city transit system, but nonprofit, I believe RISE, New Horizon, mile markers, those types of agencies. Again, as part of the application process, the state requires that all capital and operating funds be listed on the tip in a pending parking lot status until they're awarded. What's in front of you now is just a list of what actually was awarded. So it's just unhighlighting them, letting you know here's the capital and operating for those programs and those services for the next few years. Under 8.6, Where am I at here? So that was the HSIP projects that we just approved at the last board meeting. Again, HSIP projects, because they're grants, they have to be placed on the tip before we apply. The 4 projects was the State Route 95 raised median, the McCulloch Boulevard surfacing feedback signs, Swanson Avenue, some of the flashing beacons, high visibility crosswalk, and then the Horizon 6 Gold Springs Blue Canyon with widen it 3 feet and restripe. Again, we approved this at the last board meeting. Now we put them on the tip in a parking lot status. We send the applications in to Adot, and if they're awarded, we come back and remove the parking lot status and label them awarded in the tip. And then last but not least, and this one's a little presumptuous of me because it's the next agenda item, but for 8.7 was the Greater Arizona Legislative Set-Aside Project. Again, because we're not really sure the funding on this, it's not typical that the COGS and MPOs program state apportionments or set-aside funds. So the COG and MPO directors decided to handle this as just another funding source and vet it through the normal process and treat it with the same respect that we would STBG or HSIP. So because it's not awarded and it hasn't happened yet, we're still placing it on the tip to garner support. And we're going to vote hopefully in the next few minutes on this item. But again, I just wanted to let you know that we put it on there. It's unawarded, unfunded. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions for any of these sub items under tip amendment number 8.
Yeah, thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Hembry? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Councilmember Lane.
make a motion to accept the changes to the tip as presented by Mr. Hembry.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Lane and a second from Supervisor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, item 8 on the agenda is recommend approval of Swanson Avenue RTAC priority project. Mr. Hembry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you recall, last board meeting, we had the conversation of the Greater Arizona RTAC priority project. There's $50 million statewide per capita funding. Our chunk for the MPO is the $1.6 million or $1,687,775 to be exact. We took the project to the TAC. They introduced a single project for that amount of funding, and that is what's before you today. There is a fact sheet for the Swanson Avenue improvements, and this is for Swanson Avenue from Lake Havasu Avenue to Smoke Tree. It would be a mill and fill project with anywhere from 5 to 5.5 inches of brand new pavement, so almost a complete rebuild all the way down to subbase, and restriping as necessary and ADA ramps if we have enough funding to cover all of that improvements. But mainly the goal is to do the mill and fill 0.6 miles from Lake Havasu Avenue to Smoke Tree. So it was approved at the TAC meeting last month, and it's before you today for approval. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there's no other funding set aside right now to finish Swanson. We just did the Swanson project from Okoma to Smoke Tree. Now this would take Smoke Tree down to Lake Havasu Avenue if awarded. Are there any comments or questions from any members of the board? Councilmember Lane?
If I may, thank you. Justin, will this basically take what was already done as the chairman said, from what we did from Okoma down to Smoke Tree? Will then the rest of that look basically the same with the same type of the bicycle lane, the striping and all that, or just mill and fill and restripe it the way it is?
I believe, to answer your Mr. Chairman and Member Lane, yes and no. So I think the caveat there is on the other, from Smoke Tree to Okoma, there was kind of that shared use path. And I just don't think there was enough room, or there was some, I have to get with engineering and Greg on this, but I believe that we might not be able to quite accommodate the shared use path. But as far as the pavement, my understanding is, yes, once they repave, they can restripe and reconfigure to accommodate some sort of bicycle lane, possibly. I don't know, because that stretch also has other turn lanes and other capacity issues from Smoke Tree down. So I think that's once the funds are awarded, an in-house design or in-house scope, I could bring back some more information on that.
Thank you. Yeah, the bicycle lane goes in front of the college there in the multi-use path down to Daytona Wash there, or whatever. Pima Wash, thank you. So projecting it farther down all the way isn't that much of a priority. Getting the roadway surface redone with all those potholes and everything else along there, a great project, so thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the city council on this matter? Oh, sorry, the board, not the city council. I sometimes forget. It's the board.
Hello, Nancy Campbell. Thank you all for being here and everything you guys are doing. I appreciate it. My concern is to go past that, because on the other side of the highway there is where all those bars and restaurants are. It's a very tourist area. And as the mayor knows, it looks pretty rough. And then as you wrap up past Smoke Tree, it's up Smoke Tree and around and all of that. It's where our tourists travel. They ride bikes there, they walk, and it is more crack fill seal, I think, than actual asphalt in front of the Swanson, in front of McDonald's, that whole area. So as much as I'm excited to see that Swanson area taken care of, I'm more concerned about the Swanson wrapped around up Smoke Tree. There's my statement.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
and just for clarification to Mr. Chairman and members of the board and Nancy, to the public, as you know, legislative process is, very fickle. So there could be additional funds. If the 50 million Greater Arizona project goes beyond that, there's always opportunity to maybe discuss further improvements. But or our normal STBG funding, we definitely take notes. We're actually in the process of prioritizing local STBG, so I'll be happy to, add those notes into improvements in the future.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for possible motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Motion to approve the Swanson Avenue Improvements Project as presented by Mr. Hembry.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Lane, a second from Supervisor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, and then item 9 is recommend approval of resolution number 2021-01 RTAC priority project list. Mr. Hembry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So now that we've approved the Swanson project, just to kind of give you a background, and I don't want to fill up too much. I know we have Kevin here with RTAC on the agenda today. But basically what the COG and NPO directors did was they adopted the same resolution that was presented to the RTAC board for this Greater Arizona project, just to garner support. And again, trying to vet it through our regional local processes. That way, by the time it gets to the legislators, it's got it's clean, it's got a bow on it. It basically says, yes, we support this. And not only do we support it, but here's a local resolution stating such. So with that, the resolution in essence is just urging state lawmakers to fund the projects included in the RTAC Rural Regional Priority Project List. And for Lake Havasu NPO, that would be the Swanson project that we just recently approved on the last agenda item. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Hembry from any members of the board? All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the board on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for possible motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Motion to approve the resolution as presented by Mr. Hembry.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Lane, a second from Supervisor Johnson. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 10, which is the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, the RTEC report. Mr. Adam, and I'm not sure, Steve, if you could change the screen for us so we could see. Perfect. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Adam.
Hello, everyone. Mr. Chairman, members, appreciate the opportunity to address you. And first off, thanks for your support and participation on this legislation for next year. I think that just real briefly, an update on where we are at the state. Fiscal year 21 was just closed out, and the state budget staff estimates that the carry forward balance is roughly 700 million so going into the current year, we're already got a surplus out there of about 700 million, and then revenue collections for July came in roughly 145 million above forecasts. And so I think that unless there's a major collapse of the economy, right now it's looking very likely that the state will once again have a very sizable carry forward balance to work with, which means that the likelihood that they'll consider earmarking specific projects with some of that surplus is very high. So I think it's makes perfect sense for us to be engaged and throw our 2 cents in there as far as what the priorities are and what should be funded across the state. So we're ready to be proactive, and we think the potential is clearly there next legislative session. But with that said, the big revenue potential lies with Washington, and I think we're very close to a vote on a very substantial infrastructure package. This has been brewing for quite some time. I think both parties have attempted to make it a priority, and as difficult as it is to move things through Washington, very significantly, about a month ago, there was a bipartisan agreement reached in the Senate with the participation of the president. And basically, this legislation got out of the Senate on a 69-30 vote. It's currently at the House, and the Speaker has committed to having it voted on prior to September 27th. So we're less than 2 weeks away from that. There's essentially 2 major components of this infrastructure bill. The first being a 5-year continuation of all the federal transportation programs, and that's typically what we receive on a recurring basis, not just the highway performance funding, which is the main funding source for all of Adot's new construction across the state highway system, but also some of the funding that does get allocated down to the regions, such as the STBG and the HSIP funding, and also the federal planning funding, which makes up a big part of the small MPO's operating budgets, and including Lake Havasu. What is proposed is a very significant increase in those program funding levels. Last year, or I guess I should say, for this current year, ADOT's share of that federal funding was $800 million. With the first year of this legislation, that amount would increase by about $170 million. And by the 5th year in 2026, the amount would be $250 million above that $800 million for the current year. So that's a very substantial increase in all of the main core programs that we receive from the federal government. But in addition, there's going to be, I think, another very significant funding opportunity. excuse me, and that's with the competitive grants. And, for the last 5-6 years, we've had the FAST Act in place. That's the current authorization bill for these federal programs. And there have been two major grant programs, the INFRA program and RAISE, which RAISE gets rebranded every time there's a new administration. It was probably, for the longest period, it was called Tiger. But those were the two major grant programs that were available nationwide. And in a good year, we would receive about $2 billion. Again, that $2 billion would be available nationwide. Under this new legislation, the amount of funding that would be available is $105 billion. That averages out to $21 billion a year. So, compare that to the $2 billion that has been available. We're going to 21. That's about a 10-time increase. So those existing grant programs will continue at higher levels, but there will also be 7 new grant programs that would be established, and everything from one that's specific to rural infrastructure. There's one for safety. There's one for bridges. There's one that would be a supplemental pot for federal and tribal lands. Bottom line is there's going to be a very significant increase in grant funding available, and the state DOTs are eligible for that, but local jurisdictions are as well. And so that is a funding source that you would be able to apply directly to the federal government for. So I would encourage all jurisdictions to be prepared to be proactive, because I think there will be some very significant funding opportunities in the very near future. And again, that's the speaker has committed to vote on this prior to the 27th. The current authority for the federal transportation programs is set to expire on September 30th. So we need to get something in place fairly quickly. And so I think that will probably provide enough momentum to basically see this through. So I'll keep everybody posted, but I think we're very close to seeing some very significant revenue increases.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the update. Do any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Adam? All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you.
All right. Next is the Adot District Report. Mr. Steinenberger.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, it got a very short update today. Not too much going on. We're still working on getting a design consultant on board for the pavement preservation project on SR 95 that came down through the legislative funding. It's going to be broken up into 2 separate projects, one for the Bullhead City and Mojave Valley corridor, and then one for the Lake Havasu City area corridor. And then also too, I got to get some information over to Mr. Hembry for the 90,000 for the adaptive signals. He sent me over some information at the end of last week, and I'm still working with our traffic signal group to get him that information. If anybody's got any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you for the report. Mr. Hembry?
Yes, Todd, this is Justin. On the SR 95 project, I know originally the Lake Havasu MPO had programmed in 200,000 in STBG, but that was before the project was bundled with the Bullhead SR 95. Now that the legislation is passed, I'd like to work with you to see, are we still on the hook for that 200,000 in STBG, or can we unencumber those funds and deprogram them and reprogram them to other projects? Because right now we have this fiscal year, we have 200,000 on the books, but I'm not sure if we still need to give that to the district or how that works with the legislative process.
I believe that you're off the hook for that amount of money, but let me double check with our financial management services and I'll get back with you, Justin.
Perfect. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, Great, thank you. How is the synchronization going? So I know you talked about the 90,000, but what's the time frame that we'll have the lights synchronized on 95?
Well, it's still a lengthy process. I mean, we're going to get the information over to Justin, and we're going to use the 90,000 potentially for the coordination plan and the data collection and all of that. And I know, I don't know the exact figure, but through our traffic signal group, they're going to have some additional money to put in for some of the equipment and everything. And after the data collection and the coordination plan, we'll have kind of a better idea of a time frame. But after that, it's going to come down to getting dollars to upgrade the actual physical hardware on the traffic signals on Lake Havasu Avenue and SR 95.
So what's the time frame to get to the time frame? So like how long does that process take before we can get to the part to determine a time frame?
We're probably tentatively looking at we're going to have to get the traffic count somewhere this winter, because that's going to probably be the increase with the snowbirds. So I am anticipating late winter, early spring.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And then also thank you for your department's assistance with cleaning up Highway 95. But we still need more of that. Do you have an update on how we can get 95 cleaned up from trash and debris?
We will work with our maintenance group and see what we can do to do another cleanup. I know it's a high priority for everybody. You know, for us, it comes down to actual manpower resources. You know, our Needle Mountain Maintenance Unit is a small unit in comparison to the lane miles that they have to cover. You know, they cover I-40 almost into Kingman and Lake Havasu and Bullhead City. So I'm going to have to get with our unit supervisor for that maintenance unit and get back with you on an update on that. And then also, too, I'm currently working on a blanket maintenance agreement, and I'll be coordinating that with the city manager and Greg, and see what we can do on getting some more teamwork efforts on the litter and the debris along the SR 95 corridor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Todd? All right, well, thank you, Todd. Move on to item 12, the Arizona Transportation Board report. Mr. Knight.
Thank you. As you know, we've got the Transportation Board meeting coming up Friday. It will be virtual only. But in going over the agenda, it looks like for Mojave County, we've got new projects that are being introduced to be approved by the Transportation Board. If you look specifically, if you go to the agenda on the Transportation Board's website, it's items 6I and 6J. But basically, you've got 46.7 million, and these are figures. These are amounts that the legislature has appropriated and that it passed with the budget. The 46.7 million for repaving SR 95 from milepost 175 to 201 and milepost 227 to 250. Another 690,000 SR 95 spur, state line to Riverside Drive, asphalt replacement, 1.425 million I-40 milepost 0 to milepost 2.4. That's a 1-inch thin bonded overlay. So that's from monies that the legislature appropriated to in the budget bill, and so that's now coming to the board and for board approval Friday. And those were the three items. There were many items on those two agenda items, but those are the three that had to do with Mojave County.
Excellent. Thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Knight? All right. Thank you, Mr. Knight.
You bet.
Item 13 is future agenda items. Do any members of the board have any future agenda items? All right, our upcoming meeting schedule, we'll have a TAC meeting, an MPO Technical Advisory Committee meeting on September 28th, 2021. That'll be held in person at 900 London Bridge Road. Our next executive board meeting, if necessary, will be October 12th, 2021. That'll be held in person at the council chambers. And then there is a state transportation board that Mr. Knight mentioned, and then there's another one in October in Casa Grande that is closed to the public. So I'm not sure if that's available through electronic means for the public, but keep your eyes on that. With that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to apologies
yes.
to interrupt real quick. So the October 12th executive board meeting actually has been canceled. We'll be in travel status to the RTS that day for the 13th and 14th. So the October board meeting has been canceled. The agenda looked pretty light, so we're just going to couple that with the September 9th meeting. So with October, we won't have a board meeting.
Okay.
And Sarah will send out the cancel the meeting and send out a reminder following this meeting.
Okay, so the October 12th executive board meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
You know, I was going to mention that you got a conflict with the Rural Transportation Summit. The 12th being the travel day to Maricopa for the travel for the Rural Transportation Summit, which takes place the 13th and 14th, and the State Transportation Board meeting will be on the 15th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, great. All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. We are adjourned. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.